Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. We have a lot to cover this morning. So much news in the world. But I want to begin with a story. Several of you have emailed me about this, and I want to address it head on. After 88 years, the Gallup Poll will no longer measure a presidential term's approval rating. So no longer will you see whether Donald Trump is approved or disapproved when it comes to the Gallup polls. I'm very disturbed about this. And I think despite Gallup's denial, there is no question but that Trump's sinking poll ratings have caused Gallup to say, rather than publish it, let's just do away with it. We don't want to antagonize the president. Now, that's not what Gallup is saying, but that's what John Rothman is saying. Clearly, the Gallup poll, after 88 years, no longer measuring presidential popularity, is astounding. After all, we need to know whether people like or dislike our president. I want to know what we think. And so I was very disturbed by that. And I wanted to say, on the eve of President's Day, I wanted to emphasize that because Monday we will celebrate presidents. And so we will not have any measure from Gallup of the popularity of Donald Trump. Fortunately, other polling agencies are going to continue those kinds of polls. But Gallup, God, if George were alive, he'd be upset. No doubt about it. I need to comment about Pam Bondi and her testimony yesterday before the House of Representatives. I listened with great care to the entire press availability. That is to say, the press covered it extensively, and that is to say, I heard most of what Pam Bondi had to say. It was shameful. Pam Bondi has no business being Attorney General of the United States. She's there because she's loyal to Donald Trump. And there's nothing wrong with loyalty to a president. But there is something wrong when you come into a hearing that is an oversight hearing, and all you proceed to do is to insult and blast members of the committee. Now, I know the Democrats came in loaded for bear. They were prepared to go after Pam Bondi with everything they had. And of course, Pam Bondi gave it right back. That was not a hearing, it was a circus. And I must say to you very clearly, it was shameful. Pam Bondi should not be Attorney General. But we need to have some method of ensuring that when questions are asked, they are answered. When accusations are made, they are answered as well. And if you noticed, Pam Bondi didn't answer any questions, seemed mostly to be on the defensive, although she tried to appear to be on the offensive. So Pam Bondi did not score with me yesterday. Now we had some good news yesterday. The Stonewall flag, taken down the other day, as we commented, is back up in New York. Clearly, there was a very negative feeling about what Donald Trump and his administration were doing to suppress gay rights. So I'm delighted that at Stonewall, the flag is flying. We should also make a comment about foreign policy, because so much is going on. As you may know, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Donald Trump at the White House yesterday. The question was Iran. And they may have focused on some other things, but Iran was the primary question. Remember when Donald Trump said that the United States and Israel had obliterated the Iranian nuclear capability? Well, here we are a few months later, and Iran is back on track developing a nuclear capability. And the president is proposing that there should be some sort of an agreement with Iran. Look, I have no problem with an agreement with Iran, with the understanding that the Iranians don't keep any agreements, and that clearly the nuclear problem with Iran is going to grow. My hope is that the United States and Israel will be able to coordinate what they do. That is, to me, the real question. Now let's talk for a few minutes about another blow to the Trump administration. As you know, there were 5 members of Congress, including 2 sitting United States senators, who the Trump administration wanted to indict. I think the term used was sedition, because they made a tape that urged military members not to obey laws that were clearly, or orders rather, that were clearly against the law. By the way, they used the same language that is in the military code of conduct. Nothing extraordinary about their statement, except that they chose to make it because they have no confidence in the Trump administration's willingness to go along with the rules. As a result, the Trump administration wanted to indict members of Congress who participated in that video. And I'm delighted to tell you, despite great pressure, no grand jury was prepared to issue that indictment. By the way, you know the old expression, getting an indictment from a grand jury is as easy as getting a ham sandwich? Well, I got news for you. It was very clear to me that the Trump administration had no grounds for this. However, not to be defeated, the Trump administration has said, we are urging everyone to keep all of the paperwork in line. We'll be back to this. So they may go to another grand jury. They may go somewhere else. But the idea that Mark Kelly, and I'm speaking now primarily of Mark Kelly, a combat veteran, a Navy pilot, flew missions that were absolutely essential to national security, went up in outer space 4 times for the United States of America in space research. This guy indicted, having his military pay reduced, his pension rather reduced, having his rank reduced. And of course, the Trump administration is being rebuffed on every level, and rightly so. This is an important statement about the importance of the judiciary as a restraint against excesses in the Trump administration. Now, let me make a quick comment about 2 votes that took place in the House of Representatives, because again, it shows the power of Congress, at least theoretically. The House voted no on the Trump tariffs against Canada. It was very interesting. The vote was 219 to 211. 6 Republicans voted with the Democrats, and Donald Trump received a defeat. However, these are not binding votes. And so Donald Trump is going to continue to do what he wants unless the Supreme Court of the United States says he can't. And I want to remind you that we are watching every single day for that judgment, which is going to come down from the Supreme Court on the question of whether or not Donald Trump can impose tariffs unilaterally. I would suggest to you that when the court rules, the odds are Trump will not have that power. The odds are that the Supreme Court will rule that Trump, a president, any president, does not have the power to impose tariffs. We've talked about it before, but I want you to understand how significant it is that at least 6 members of the Republican Party peeled away from Donald Trump on this question. Remember, the majority in the House of Representatives that Speaker Johnson has now is 1 vote. That's it. But there was a second vote in the House of Representatives on something called the Save America Act. The vote was 218 to 213, a little bit closer, but nonetheless an important and significant vote. It has to do with the Trump administration wanting to begin the process of federalizing elections, of imposing on the states rules for voting, including voter ID. There is also the question of whether or not absentee ballots or ballots sent by mail should be counted after a certain deadline. And this passed narrowly, as I want to say again, 218 to 213. And what was interesting to me is there is absolutely no path for this bill in the Senate. So the House may choose to pass a resolution like this. But unless the Senate acts, it goes nowhere. Now, you understand if the Senate were to approve it and the president were to sign it, it would then go to court, because there are those who would dispute federal authority when it comes to the question of voter rights, when it comes to the question of interference by the federal government in what is clearly defined by the Constitution as a state matter. These issues are all critical, and that's the reason why I'm raising them with you now. Speaker Johnson is not going to be Speaker much longer. Either there will be special elections that will give the Democrats the majority, or in November of this year, just a few months from now, I believe the Democrats will win enough seats to become the majority party in the House of Representatives. That would mean, under the current circumstances, that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, would become Speaker of the House. It would also mean that investigative abilities would be invested in a Democratic majority. Donald Trump doesn't want that. He's doing everything he can to avoid it. And if you believe what you're hearing, the Republicans are going to turn Donald Trump loose to the American people before the election, saying just that. Keep the House under Republican control or all hell will break loose. And he's probably right. There will be investigations of Donald Trump on a whole host of issues. And of course, the ability of the House of Representatives to investigate really depends on the majority. And if the Democrats have the majority, there's a lot about Donald Trump that is worth investigating. It's just that simple. The important element here is that the American people are going to have a very interesting election. We are going to have an interesting election come November, and we will cover that on the Voice of where we are and how we're doing things, and whether or not we believe that there will be, state by state, a real change. We also have to have our voices in the United States Senate. And the question is, what will the Senate do? Will the Senate change hands? Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, who is a Republican, has announced for re-election, but she has tremendous opposition. And let me remind you that if the Democrats capture that seat in Maine, the Republicans may have a problem holding the United States Senate. Donald Trump's nightmare scenario is that the Democrats capture both the House and the Senate. So I was asked, if that were to happen, would impeachment proceed? Well, it might. There's no doubt that the Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee would vote to impeach the president. And if they have a majority on the floor of the House, I've no doubt that the House would vote that. But remember, the obstacle is not getting an article of impeachment passed if the Democrats control the House. It is conviction. And for conviction in the United States Senate, you need to have two-thirds of the senators voting to remove the president. And that, no matter how you stack the numbers, is highly unlikely unless Donald Trump does something so egregious. There is one last comment I want to make, because even as we are doing this recording, I listened to most of it, Tom Homan was presenting the fact that things are de-escalating in Minnesota, but ICE is still going to do its job. If you listened carefully to Mr. Holman, his comments were filled with contradictions. And so we have to see how this plays out, particularly as Mr. Holman went after the idea of sanctuary cities, which is something that Donald Trump despises. But the very simple fact is that Tom Holman has a job to do in terms of ICE. And let's see how he carries that out. It's going to be interesting to watch. And remember that up to now, if there is a de-escalation in Minnesota, if ICE is withdrawn from Minnesota, if the confrontations there stop, Holman and Trump will claim a victory. I would call it a Pyrrhic victory. I don't think they've accomplished what they need to do, in part because Minnesota is not the place where the problem exists. The problem exists in other states, in other places. And you will note that whether it's Texas or Illinois, that Holman is staying away from major points of controversy, including in California. In any case, these are a few observations this morning. We're going to watch all through the day. There is so much going on. And of course, that's what makes Around the Political World with John Rothman so interesting. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links to the show notes to connect with me on social media. Let me point out today is Thursday, tomorrow is Friday, and on Friday we will do a section on question and answers. So if you have question and answers, even if I've not discussed them on this podcast, you can submit them. Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program, will review them, and I will receive those written questions. Remember to include your name and your question, and I will try as best I can to answer. Please remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. And we're very grateful that the show has been getting such positive attention. We're excited to bring on the advertising support that will help us to create more opportunities for Around the Political World. And of course, that's our goal. All right, let me wrap it up by saying to Gogo Zoger, thanks, Gogo. We're going to have a meeting later today. I'm looking forward to seeing you. And to all of you, I'll be back here tomorrow with more of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.